Hey, never trust every so-called aquarium guru who claims your plants will thrive if you follow their magic formula. Hey, some of them never mention the downside to those flashy tricks, and that can cost you some money, time, and heartbreak. Hey, you might be buying fertilizers and fancy gear you don't really need, or doing water changes at weird times because you heard it in a video. There's a real path to beautiful, healthy aquarium plants, but it's not what most self-proclaimed experts are pushing on social media. Let's talk about the truths they won't tell you and the actual steps that lead to thriving aquascapes. So, maybe you've spent hours online looking for tips to make your aquarium plants flourish. You've heard the classic lines, use this special substrate and you'll have the best growth ever. Or dose fertilizers every single day at this certain hour. Or maybe someone who told you to blast your tank with high intensity lights for 10 hours and you'll see insane growth in a week. But after trying those tips, your plants might still look weak or brown, or you're battling algae that's taking over. It's frustrating when you realize that the shortcut you were promised just leads you in circles. Hey, I've been there too, listening to those who promise quick results without fully explaining what's going on under the surface. Hey, in this video, we're going to dig into the misinformation, expose the common myths, and show you how to really get your plants to thrive. So let's start by examining the biggest challenge for many aquascapers: finding real guidance that works for your specific situation, even if you see the technique that worked wonders for someone else. It may fail in your tank. Why? Because each aquarium is its own world. The water chemistry in your area might be different. Your lighting setup could be weaker or stronger. The fish load may be higher or lower, or you might have a different approach to fertilizing. So many people copy a guru's instructions, not realizing that guru may have advanced lights and automatic CO2 system dialed in. Then, when results don't match the guru's picture-perfect tank, it's the Aquarius who feels they did something wrong, even though they're following the instructions to a T. That sense of failure can make new hobbyists quit or keep spending money chasing the next miracle fix. I want to highlight something right off the bat. The real secret to thriving aquarium plants is finding a balance. Balance among light, nutrients, CO2, if you're using it, and maintenance habits. But that's not as flashy as a so-called pro telling you just buy this special device and all your problems will go away. The core reason many gurus push simplified advice is because it sounds neat and it sells. They might have an affiliate link to a specific fertilizer brand or substrate that they claim revolutionized their growth. Or they might push a one-size-fits-all approach because it's easy to explain. And it makes them look like they have the magic answer. But here's the truth. Different plants have different needs. If your water is super soft and you're trying to grow a plant that prefers harder water, hey, no amount of fancy substrate alone will fix that mismatch. So if you have no idea how much light intensity your lamp produces, blindly adding more fertilizers could just fuel algae. So, believing that a single approach is the key to success can lead you down a rabbit hole of wasted money. So, let me lay out a few statements that might sound familiar and talk about why they can be misleading. Number one, adding CO2 is optional. Your plants will grow fine without it. Hey, this statement is often delivered by so-called experts who point to their low-tech tank with slow-growing plants as proof. While it's true certain robust plants can survive in low-tech setups, most of the lush, vibrant aquascapes you see online use CO2 injections. Hey, they may not openly admit it in every video, but if you peek at the tank for or read the fine print in the description, you often see a CO2 setup is there. CO2 helps plants use light and nutrients more efficiently. Without enough carbon, your plants won't reach that bright, healthy look that you see in highlight reels. So, if you're aiming for that lush, heavily planted scape, a CO2 system can make a huge difference. Yet gurus often gloss over it, leaving you wondering why your plants look so dull. So number 2, you don't need to test your water, just trust your eyes. You'll hear some folks say that water parameters aren't that important. But if you're dealing with yellowing leaves, stunted growth, or an algae bloom, you need data. Most new hobbyists are told that weekly water changes are enough, or that their tap water has okay parameters by default. However, things like GH, KH, pH, nitrate levels, and phosphate levels can vary dramatically depending on your tap source and how your aquarium cycles. If a guru never tests their water, that's because they might have a stable water source and years of experience reading subtle plant cues. But for a new aquarist, test kits are valuable tools. Hey, relying only on guesswork can create huge headaches. So number 3, if your plants aren't growing, just add more fertilizer. Too many gurus treat fertilizers as a cure-all, but overdoing fertilizers can trigger algae issues if your tank isn't balanced. Plants do need nutrients like nitrates, phosphates, iron, and other trace elements. Yet, more is not always better. The actual ratio of light to nutrients to CO2 matters. If you only have moderate light and minimum CO2, or none at all, but you're dumping in fertilizers like crazy, that can tip the scales in favor of algae. Or it can make your fish stressed if the water chemistry swings too much. Real success comes from synergy, good light, stable CO2 or carbon source like liquid carbon in some low-tech tanks, and a fertilizer routine that matches the consumption rate of your plants. That requires adjusting your dose based on plant growth and visual cues. Hey, many gurus skip that nuance and say, just dose more, which doesn't solve the root problem. Number 4, the more light, the better. Hey, high light can speed up photosynthesis, yes, if you have everything else balanced, but it also opens a door for algae if nutrients or CO2 aren't sufficient. Hey, beginners see those bright aquascapes with super intense lights and think that's the secret. But often, high light is paired with pressurized CO2 injection and strict fertilizer regimens. If you only copy the lighting aspect without the rest, you can get explosions of algae. It's not that high light is bad, it's about context. Hey, if someone is telling you bright lights alone are the key, that's incomplete advice. Number 5, use this substrate brand and you'll forget about everything else. Well, there are some substrate brands that do hold and release nutrients, yes, helping plants to thrive. But that doesn't eliminate the need for balancing, fertilizing, good water conditions, and a stable environment. So, if a guru claims a particular substrate brand is all you need to have a top-tier planted tank, that's an oversimplification. Great substrate is a component of success, but you still need to address lighting, CO2, and routine maintenance. Hey, some advanced substrates even lower pH or release ammonia at first. So if you're not aware of that, you might have livestock problems. These are just a few examples, but they capture a pattern. Many online experts reduce aquascaping success to a single piece of the puzzle. That might be because it's easier to sell one concept or a product, or they might not want to scare newcomers by explaining all the elements in detail. But real aquascaping success demands balance and patience. It can be simple, yes, but not if you skip entire steps. You can start small with low demanded plants, moderate lighting, and light fertilization, and you'll see decent growth. You can also go the high-tech route with bright lights, CO2 injection, and advanced fertilizers, and rescape every few months if you enjoy the challenge. The point is, it's not just one factor that magically solves everything. Let's walk through how you can figure out the right balance for your aquarium. Rather than following a one-size-fits-all approach, first think about the plants you want to keep. If you love carpet plants of dwarf hairgrass or Monte Carlo, you'll likely need stronger light and a CO2 system to see quick, full growth. But if you're content with easy plants like Java ferns and Nubias and mosses, you can get by with lower light and no CO2 injection. Don't let a guru shame you into thinking you need to go high-tech if you're not comfortable with it yet. The best approach is the one that fits your goals and your budget. Next, measure your water parameters. Check your pH, GH, KH, and nitrate levels at least. Why? Because these factors influence plant growth. For example, if your water is extremely soft, you might need to remineralize to ensure your plants get enough calcium and magnesium. If your water is very hard, you might pick plants that thrive in that environment. Or you might treat your water if you want to keep species that prefer softer conditions. Hey, many new aquarists skip this step and wonder why their plants look stunted or the leaves keep melting. Well, by understanding your baseline water chemistry, you can tailor your fertilizer and substrate choices. So now let's talk about lighting in a bit more depth. Lighting is a massive topic, but the main takeaway is that you want enough light intensity to support the type of plants you have. If you have high demand plants, a stronger light is key, but it also means to have to balance nutrients and CO2 or you'll get algae. If you have low demand plants, a moderate light can be plenty. Hey, a decent rule of thumb is around 8 hours of light per day for many setups, though you can adjust that. Too long a photo period can bring algae, especially if your tank is still maturing. It's better to start with a slightly shorter light period and then gradually increase it as you see how the plants respond. Then, consider your nutrient approach. Most aquarium plants need a combination of macronutrients like nitrates, phosphates, and potassium, plus micronutrients like iron, magnesium, and others. Some advanced setups use the EI or estimative index method, dosing more fertilizer than needed and then resetting with weekly water changes. And others do lean dosing if they want to limit algae growth. Again, there isn't a universal right or wrong here. It depends on your plant load, lighting level, presence of CO2, and how heavily you feed your fish. If you feed your fish a lot of food, your tank might already have higher nitrates and phosphates, so you might not need as much fertilizer. But a guru who's using a minimal fish load might need to add more fertilizers to keep their plants happy. Context is everything. Hey, CO2 is often a hidden variable that gurus leave out. Many of those jaw-dropping aquascapes that new hobbyists dream of replicate nature with thick carpets, vibrant reds, and fast growth, well, that's typically done with pressurized CO2 systems. Hey, CO2 can be a game changer for plant growth, but it also brings complexity. You have to monitor the CO2 levels to avoid harming your fish, and you might want to use a drop checker or pH monitor. Some newcomers assume they can just place a CO2 diffuser in the tank and run at full blast for hours. Well, that can lead to pH swings or stressed fish. You have to dial it in and typically turning on the CO2 about an hour before the lights turn on and off about an hour before lights out. If a guru never mentions these details, they might be glossing over the most critical steps to keep your fish alive. That's what can happen when creators only cheer the final masterpiece and not the behind the scenes process. So let's shift into why these shortcuts or oversimplifications keep popping up. The world of online content is crowded. People want their videos or posts to go viral, so they focus on bold claims like add this single product to never get algae again, or use this brand of substrate and you get perfect growth. Well, that's more of an exciting story than you need to test your water, choose plants that match your parameters, dial in your fertilizers, watch for algae, and adjust your approach weekly. One approach sounds super easy, while the other sounds time consuming. But the second approach is honest. It's how real aquascapers handle their tanks. So there's also a financial angle. Some gurus get paid by sponsors to hype a certain product. They might have affiliate links where they earn money if you buy the fertilizer or lights they use. They might not mention cheaper alternatives because that doesn't bring them a commission. So, you might watch a glamorous video about a miracle substrate that ensures perfect plant health. You might buy it. It costs an arm and a leg, and you still have to supplement fertilizers or correct the pH. Then, you're stuck with buyer's remorse, while the guru collects a commission. Of course, not everyone who has a sponsor is automatically lying, but it's good to be aware of possible conflicts of interest. So let's get into the real secrets of thriving plants, which are not flashy, but they work. Number one, research your plants before you buy them. Make a list of species you want and see if they're considered easy, medium, or advanced. Look at the requirements for light, temperature, pH range, and other details. This ensures you're not setting yourself up for failure with a plant that can't survive in your water. Also, watch out for non-aquatic plants sold at pet stores. Some shops will label things like mondo grass or certain Dracena species or as aquatic, but they don't last fully submerged. Real aquatic plants can thrive if you give them the right conditions. So number two, know your tap water. Test it. Keep track of basic parameters like pH and GH. If your pH is very high and you want to keep delicate plants that prefer acidic water, you might need to mix in reverse osmosis water or consider other adjustments. If your GH is extremely low, you might have to remineralize or pick plants that don't mind salt water. So what I'm trying to say is this is all about matching your conditions to your plants, rather than trusting a guru's one-size-fits-all formula. Number three, decide on your level of commitment to CO2. If you want a low-tech tank, accept that your growth rate will be slower and your plant selection might be limited to easy species like Java fern, Anubias, cryptocorn, Amazon swords, and mosses. That could still be a beautiful tank. So if you aim for high-tech scape with bright lights, you'll likely need pressurized CO2 injection and a better understanding of fertilizer dosing and algae control. Hey, whichever you choose, plan around that. And don't try to copy a high-tech approach if you're not providing CO2. Number four, balance your lighting period. Start around 6 to 8 hours and observe how your plants and algae respond. If you see algae exploding, reduce the duration of or intensity of your lights. If your plant seems starved for light, you can slowly increase the duration. This is a dance. You're always watching how your tank reacts and adjusting it. That's real aquarium keeping. Number five, use a consistent fertilizing routine. You can dose daily or weekly depending on your method. The key is consistency. So keep notes on how your plants look, how often you do water changes, and what changes you notice. If leaves are yellowing, you might be low on iron or nitrates. If you see black brush algae, you might have an imbalance in CO2 or too much light. So over time, you get a real feel of what your tank needs, but it's a process, not a quick fix. Number 6, embrace patience. Plants take time to adapt to new conditions. Just because you followed a guru's 3-step formula for a week and saw no change doesn't mean it's not working. Some plants melt their old leaves before growing new ones that are adapted to your water chemistry. So it can take weeks to see real improvements. So slow and steady changes help you avoid big fluctuations that stress fish and create algae opportunities. Now, let's discuss what I call the real secret that gurus often ignore. Observation and adjustment. Hey, the best aquascapers out there are constantly watching their tanks, noticing small signs of deficiency or algae, and making minor tweaks. Maybe the leaves are a lighter shade of green, or they add a bit of more iron, and maybe they see some black brush algae near the filter outflow. So what do? They reduce the photoperiod or up their CO2. It's like gardening. Nobody expects to throw seeds in the ground and walk away with perfect tomatoes in the garden. You check the soil, water the plants, prune the leaves, remove pests, and feed them over time. Aquascaping is no different. Hey, gurus who pretend you can just follow a simple bullet list one time and get perfect results forever are leaving out the entire practice of adjusting to your aquarium's feedback. They make it sound like it's a set it and forget it, which is rarely true. If your tank is stable for many months and you have the balance locked in, you can relax a bit. But at the start, you have to learn by doing. Don't feel discouraged if your first attempt is hiccups. That's normal. Keep tracking changes. Watch how your fish behave. Note how many the plants grow. And you'll develop the skill to keep everything balanced. There's also the factor of livestock. Some gurus focus purely on plant growth and don't talk much about fish or shrimp. Yet these are living creatures in your tank and they produce waste. That waste turns into nutrients for plants, but it also can build up if you're not doing regular water changes or if your filtration is weak. So, if you overstock, you'll have more nitrates. If you keep fish that are known to be nibble on plants, you'll have holes in your leaves. So, that's part of the bigger picture. You can't talk about aquascaping without talking about the tank's entire ecosystem. So if your guru never mentions fish load, that's a red flag. They might be ignoring a core aspect of the hobby. So one of the most misleading statements is, I never do water changes and my plants are beautiful. Well, maybe that's a person who has a giant pond-like aquarium that's heavily planted with a tiny fish load. Or maybe they have a special setup with a constant drip system. For most everyday hobbyists, water changes are a standard part of a good tank maintenance. Hey, it removes excess nutrients, replenishes trace elements, and keeps your water clear. Sure, some advanced folks have balanced tanks that need fewer changes, but that's not the norm for beginners. So don't assume you can skip water changes because you saw it in a guru's video. You have to build that stability first. And you can't only do that with a lot of knowledge and a very balanced system. We also need to address the hype around miracle products. Whether it's a supplement that claims to remove all algae or a special piece of technology that claims to fix everything, there's no single product that will handle all your issues. Algae is normal. Fish can't breathe if the CO2 is cranked up too high. Plants do die sometimes, and certain species might not do well in your water. That's the reality of aquascaping. If you see a big claim that this one device changed my entire approach, question it. Ask what's happening chemically. Look for actual results from multiple sources and see if it matches your tank needs. Hey, so now that we've laid out the pitfalls, how do we put all that together into a real plan? Here's a step-by-step idea that you can tweak to your own situation. Step 1. Decide on your tank size and the type of aquascape you want, low-tech or high-tech. Number 2. Choose plants that match your comfort level and your water chemistry. If you're just starting, go for hardy plants like Java fern, Anubias, crypts, and swords. If you're feeling adventurous, you could try some stem plants or carpeting plants with CO2. Step number 3. Gather the right tools. Test kits for pH, GH, KH, nitrates, a reliable light with a known wattage or par rating if possible. Substrate suited for your goals. It can be an inert substrate plus root tabs, or an active plant substrate if you want something more advanced. Step number 4. Cycle your tank properly, ensuring your filter can handle ammonia and nitrate. Add fish slowly, don't rush this. And number 5, start with a moderate lighting schedule, around 6 to 8 hours, and an easy fertilizing plan, maybe once or twice a week to begin with. If you have CO2, start at a low bubble rate and observe your fish, adjusting carefully to avoid stress. And then 6, watch your plants for the next few weeks. If your leaves turn yellow or pale, you might need to add a little bit more fertilizer or check if your CO2 is consistent. If you see algae, figure out which kind it is. Diatoms are common in new fish tanks. Green spot algae can happen if phosphates are low or if you have strong light. Blackbeard algae can be linked to CO2 inconsistencies or too much organic matter in the water. So tweak your routine to address these problems. And number 7, continue testing water weekly or biweekly to track your nitrates, pH, and other parameters. Make small adjustments, and then if your nitrates are always high, maybe feed less or do more water changes. If they're always 0, maybe you have to fertilize more or reduce water changes. And step 8, over time, you'll see what works best for your specific tank, and you'll learn how to read your plants. You'll realize there's no single method that works for everyone, and you adapt. So by following this kind of measured approach, you avoid the heartache of chasing quick fixes. You also become a more confident aquarist. You realize that the big secret is paying attention, making gradual changes, and learning from your mistakes. That's the opposite of the typical flashy guru advice where they say, just do X, and you're left confused when it doesn't pan out. So before we wrap things up, let me talk about a few final myths that often pop up. If you trim your plants too often, they'll stop growing. Actually, pruning encourages new growth in many stem plants. You can't keep certain plants unless you have a big tank. Well, tank size matters for fish, but many smaller plants can grow in nano tanks if you provide the right conditions. Algae means you failed as an aquascaper. No. Algae is a normal and part of your ecosystem. Skilled aquarists learn to manage algae so it doesn't take over. The bottom line is, gurus who lie or oversimplify might be doing it for clicks, or they might only be sharing part of the story. True aquascaping mastery comes from understanding that you're creating a small ecosystem with plants, fish, microbes, and equipment all interacting. When you respect that complexity, things get easier because you know what to adjust. So instead of dumping in random chemicals or taking blanket advice, you test, you observe, and make logical tweaks. Hey, in closing, remember that each aquarium is unique. Don't be discouraged if your experience doesn't match a video you saw. For real lasting plant health, you need to consider your specific water parameters, lighting, fertilizers, CO2 if you use it, and fish load. Pay attention to what your tank is telling you. If you do that, you'll unlock the secret to thriving plants balance. Hey, join me in another aquatic adventure up here, and I will see you there.